Hello, friends, and welcome to Binge O'Clock, the podcast where we watch something and then we talk about it. I'm Joy Selden. I've seen almost everything.
I'm Danielle Nga, and I've seen almost nothing.
And we're here tonight for a movie night.
Movie night.
Of The Last Unicorn. That 1982 classic.
Which was one I had not seen. Dear friends.
Yes.
One I had not seen.
In an effort to try and show Danielle some of the childhood things that I was like, yes, I would get The Last Unicorn's theme song stuck in my head if observers ever had to like read my mind. I would 100% just when the last lion
Imagine
roars,
this exactly.
I would just do it. I would just do it.
Now, wait, was this one of the ones you watched over and over and over again? Or what exactly was this movie to you?
Okay, so funny story. The Last Unicorn was actually one of my sister's favorite movies.
Oh.
And I didn't, because it came out, I believe it was in 1982. So I actually wasn't born yet when it came out, but that's neither here nor there because there's a bunch of stuff from the year that I was born that I definitely watched over and over again. No, but this was one of my sister's favorites. And she would always make our grandmother rent it from the library. Mm. And my grandmother would always guffaw every time she heard the magician's name. because
Wait, is that like dirty joke that I don't understand?
Basically, his name in Yiddish translates to bumbling buffoon.
Oh, okay.
I think it's like the noun version of schlemiel, which is like somebody who just can't get it together.
Okay,
and
all right.
They're not. It's not that they're obnoxious, but it's like they're dumb. It's like calling somebody dumb. And he uses this as his name. And so every time he introduces himself as, I am Schmendrick the magician, it's basically like he was saying, I am stupid. And my grandmother would lose it every time.
I love that. When you said guffawed, I thought maybe it was a hidden like penis joke or something, but I wasn't sure. Sometimes those just go over my head.
Look, if PG-13 had been a rating at the time this came out, I'm pretty sure this would have gotten the PG-13 rating.
Really? For the what? The pink tree's ample bosom? Or
for the pink tree's ample bosom, for some minor nudity?
Oh, yeah, fair.
Minor.
There's like strategically placed hair every time it happens.
There's definitely strategic placed hair. I also think it's a fairly violent cartoon. Like, yeah. Listeners, there was a moment I had where...
Speaking of fairly violent cartoons, like what was Pinocchio rated when it first came out?
Oh, well, that's a great question.
Because
I don't even know, do we have ratings?
I feel like when I watched Pinocchio as a child, that movie completely freaked me out. The giant scary whale, the scene with the donkey transformation, just all of it was awful. This felt less violent than that.
Movie ratings are a relatively recent thing. PG-13 wasn't even there in 1982. Like, there was some article I saw that was like rated G for guidance.
Oh, what?
Sort of just a general. Yeah, have you never seen that? So it used to be, it was just a rated G for guidance, which I always thought was funny.
Yeah.
And then there's parental guidance, which is like you're specifically your parents. So I always imagine like G was if you went to like someone's birthday party and they wanted to make sure there was like a chaperone there.
Okay.
I'm sure there's other people who, know this better than I do. I'm not that person. I think Pinocchio eventually got a PG-13 rating because originally it was G for like, this might require an adult.
Okay.
Like this might require an adult to explain some of the circumstances because a child might not understand them. And then PG was parental guidance. So like a parent is probably a better guardian to like let in the kid on what's happening. And then PG-13 was specifically you could not watch it without, if you were under 13, without an adult. So like your mom couldn't drop you at the theater to just to
the good
see
old
something.
days. When our parents would drop us at the theater. Okay. But anyway, I took us off track by asking about Pinocchio because, yes, there were parts of this movie that were scary. And I was kind of wondering as I was watching to myself, had I seen this as a child, would it have freaked me out? But it wasn't as vivid, I think, as Pinocchio. But maybe that's just because I saw Pinocchio when I was a legit kid and my memories of it are really exaggerated.
Sure. I mean, there's a lot in I will say this. I saw other more, violent movies that were still cartoons and that were still like, you throw this in with another Rankin and Bass, which is Secret of Nim, which is, in my opinion, a lot scarier. There's a whole like nightmare fuel scene in Secret of Nim, which, by the way, there came a moment where we were trying to choose a video and I was like, what if we watch Secret of Nim? And then I was like, oh, that kind of gets heavy. I don't know if I want to do something that heavy.
Yeah. And full disclosure, listeners, peek behind the curtain. I have seen Secret of Nim, although I saw it maybe once or twice when I was little, so I don't remember too much about it. I remember the book much better than I remember the movie. So this was a better choice, being that I was walking in knowing literally nothing about it.
Literally nothing.
Now, why did I see The Secret of Nim and say The Brave Little Toaster and not The Last Unicorn? I will never understand.
I feel like this would have passed the smell test for your parents.
Yeah, no. This absolutely would have passed the smell test. Okay, no. So the story really, the story for what it's worth, is that the way that I accessed all of these movies is that there was one missionary family who lived in the faculty housing at my school. And they would let kids come to their house, and they had a little notebook, and you could come to their house and you could look through their movies, and then you could check out movies from them. And they it didn't cost anything. They just like to keep track of who had what, so they didn't lose anything. But I remember walking into their house, and it was literally it was a hallway. And on either side of the hallway, there were these two floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, and they were just full of VHSs. And it was stuff like Fern Gully.
Living the dream.
And yeah, exactly. But it was stuff like Fern Gully and The Brave Little Toaster and that kind of scary dinosaur one.
The Land Before Time?
No, that's a sad dinosaur one. The scary dinosaur one.
Scary dinosaur one. Wait, is this
everyone
the one where it's like
dinosaur,
like dinosaurs in the city?
Yes.
Or something? Is it that one?
Yes. Yeah. And there's a scary carnival scene at the end. There's a very scary carnival scene at the end.
There is. No, there is.
Anyway,
did this person have Rockadoodle?
I don't.
Do you remember?
Recognize that? No.
Okay.
So see, whether or not I've seen movies is
Rockadoodle has an also very nightmare fuel, terrifying scene in it, and it's for children.
Entirely contingent on whether this one family happens to have purchased that VHS.
Okay, well, so that's fair. That's fair. You know what? Maybe they didn't, maybe it was too Jewish. Maybe the Yiddish name threw them off. Like, is this a Jewish story? Schmendrick, what's that? I don't know if I want my kid learning that word. I'm sorry. I shouldn't disparage this person you're talking about, who I will never meet.
I mean, I don't know how they chose their movies. Maybe, the bosoms were just a little too ample on that one tree, or the butterfly was just a little bit too high. You never know.
The butterfly might have been too high.
Now,
could have been.
How do we summarize this movie, Joy?
How do we summarize this movie? Well, okay, so as I think we've mentioned already, Last Unicorn came out in 1982. Mm-hmm. This is a Rankin and Bass flick. Directors Jules Bass and Arthur Rankin Jr. The gentleman who wrote the book that this is based on, he also wrote the screenplay, Peter S. Beagle.
Oh.
Yeah.
Nice.
Which always instantly makes me... I did not read the book for this one. I didn't have enough time. But I own the book. I just have never read it because I'm that guy. I don't do homework. We've established this. But the cast is star-studded.
Yeah,
all over the
totally.
place. You've got Alan Arkin, Jeff Bridges, Mia Farrow, Tammy Grimes, who is great. She does the voice of Molly Grew. Mm-hmm. She's amazing. Like, she had a TV show in the 60s. She was hilarious. Okay. Angela Lansbury, Christopher Lee. Christopher Lee, by the way, who is a giant nerd and brought his own copy of the book and had placeholders marked. Apparently this is something he does. He did this on Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit also. Mm-hmm. Like, he'd marked places that were like, this must be accurate to the book or I walk.
That's amazing. I love that.
And I
Wait,
love
who does he
Chris,
play in this movie?
He plays King Haggard.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
And apparently Peter, okay, so a bit of trivia. I did look up some trivia for this episode because
Okay, that's
I
exciting.
wanted to learn some things that I didn't already know. And maybe this is where I dropped the Christopher Lee thing. So apparently during the speech where he talks about only unicorns have made him happy, you know, when they're looking at the ocean, Peter S. Beagle just happened to stop by the recording booth that day. And apparently Christopher Lee like begged and pleaded with him that if he didn't have his sign off on the way he said something, he would re-record it. Like like the full-on senpai notice me of Christopher Lee. Like,
I love that.
is so great.
He did a great job as the villain in this movie.
He did. He also, another small piece of Christopher Lee trivia, he also voiced the German version of Haggard.
Ah.
This movie did really well in Germany. That's the other thing that I learned doing the
Right.
minute amount of research. I was like, interesting. Like
Is
the
there a
song was also
German soundtrack?
Well, no, as far as I know, it's the same soundtrack.
Okay.
And the America, the band that did, well, most of the songs, there's also some, obviously some background music as well.
Right.
Which was composed by someone else that I didn't write the name down of. It's fine. Doesn't matter. But like America, who's the band that does the main songs, they they didn't get a lot of airplay, like radio play here in the States.
Yeah.
But they did in Germany, and like some of their songs stayed in the top 100, peaking at 38.
That's
And
kind
I'm
of
like,
amazing.
Isn't it? And I'm just sitting here like somewhere in Germany, there's a whole generation of kids who like grew up listening to the Last Unicorn soundtrack on the radio.
And just had no idea that that's what they were listening to.
Right? Like, so yeah, as far as I know, the album is the same, but obviously they translate it for the German audience.
Yeah.
But yeah, my summary of this movie is sort of concise. I try not to go into too many specifics because I feel like we'll
get
hit
there.
on a couple of things.
Yeah.
A unicorn living in her forest finds out that she is the last one and doesn't understand how that's possible because unicorns are sort of this eternal race of beings who
Right.
have been there since the sky was born and since the moon was born. And like, you know, you can't remember a time without unicorns, except these two men who come into her forest are like, unicorns? Like the young
What's
kid is
that?
like, unicorns? What's that?
Right. Those are made up. That's a fairy
Those are made
tale.
up. That's not true. So she instead decides to go out and see what happened to the unicorns, and she has an adventure with friends along
Yes.
the way.
Perfect.
Yeah, that's as concise as I can get it.
Well, we'll dive into the rest of it. That's what we're here
I'll
for.
dive into the rest of it. I feel like we could just take it as it came. The opening
Yeah.
shot is one of my favorites, which is
Oh.
just like a shot of the forest.
It was beautiful. Magical forest. I liked the opening sequence. I mean, listen, the songs in this movie are very 80s, like late 70s, early 80s.
Look, you're lucky you got like full sentences and grammar structure. Like we weren't watching Neverending Story where there's
Oh my gosh,
there's
we
a
need to watch
whole
that.
I mean, we do need to watch that, but there's a whole section of that song that just does not make any sense no matter how you slice it. And it's fine because it's
Yeah.
the 80s and who cares? But also, why?
There was for sure a nostalgia factor to some of these songs, though. I think because they
Sure.
were sung by America. And there were a couple of America hits that made their way over to Taiwan and then became part of my parents', we're driving somewhere playlist.
Sure.
So something about those voices. I was like, yes, we are on a journey.
Yeah, it definitely has they managed to capture like the folk travel
Yes,
feel,
exactly. Like
which
we're
is
walking
not
along
easy
a
to capture.
dusty road. Now, how do we
Exactly.
feel about these medieval tapestries at the beginning? That was a very interesting opening sequence. What's
So
happening?
yeah, the shape of everything is fascinating. If you look up the illustrations from the original book, I think those are the it's not exactly like word for word, like obviously, or shape for shape per se, because obviously the unicorn herself is a different shape from the tapestry.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like the like her face shape is not the same. I think those come from Peter S. Beagle's first publication of the book. I'm not 100% sure, though, because I know I've seen those images before, but I think it's meant to be a tribute to the book.
Yeah.
I think.
And some of them are, you know, kind of a tribute to, okay, art history majors, don't get at me. But, you know, like that medieval Renaissance-y type unicorn tapestry that you always see with the flat-faced lions.
Fountain. There's a fountain and the flat-faced lions and maybe some birds and a squirrel.
Everything's weirdly 2D, but also 3D.
And the unicorn is always like reared back.
Yes,
even though not in trouble at all. I guess to intimate dancing or happiness or something.
Now, they gave this unicorn a really kind of dainty, ethereal feel that I enjoyed. I like how her mane was constantly moving. I wasn't really a kid who was obsessed with unicorns in any way, shape, or form, but I could for sure see kids who would be obsessed with this movie because of the unicorn.
I think she has a very original look about her. Yeah. Rankin and Bass will, like in later movies, I think they use this same shape for another unicorn they have in one of their other movies. But there's something about this one that's like very specific. And it's like, it also leads into the lore of the unicorn of the story, where it's like a lot of people can't actually see the unicorn because all they see is a white mare. They don't really explain
no
why.
It was very dicey. Like at first it was
like innocence and
yes,
women.
And and no man is truly innocent. What's funny is the way that, because the movie is a little old-fashioned, when the unicorn first said that no man can see me, my brain just translated it to not a single human can see me, thinking that she was just using some old-fashioned English. And then it turned out that no, it's specifically men, like biological sex men who cannot see her. And then
yes.
Pretty much. With the one exception being King Haggard at the end, who can't even really see her.
Schmentrick knows she's a unicorn.
He can, the same way that King Haggard does, right? So neither of them can really see her for who she is, and neither of them can see her horn. They just can sense the magic in her and know that she's ethereal. Right?
I mean, that's true. I suppose he says, because he does have that line of like, were I blind, I would know what you are.
Yes, exactly. It's more of her vibe.
Her vibe. She gives off the vibe of a unicorn, which I also think is really interesting because it's like, generically speaking, you wouldn't know it was a unicorn you were looking at because you don't expect to see a unicorn.
Right.
So you don't look for it. Yeah. But a white mare is also, okay, obviously not just as rare, but like still a rare find.
Yeah.
And rare enough for your brain to just be like, I mean, something's not right, but there's a white mare over there, right? Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm reaching.
I don't know.
I could be reaching.
All I know is Mommy Fortuna could see her, and so could Molly. And
there is a shot. Okay, so here's where we get into weird direction stuff, which I think the reason I think Schmentrick can see the horn, and I think he's just flirted about how he's like, of course I know who you are. If I was blind, I know who you are, is because like he just can see her and can tell who she is. There's a shot when Mommy Fortuna asks, okay, for those of you who haven't seen the movie.
Let's back up. Who's Mommy Fortuna?
When the unicorn goes out on her own, she runs into some savory characters, but she's asleep by the side of the road. And this little like, oh God, how would you even explain it? Like a traveling circus of animals, I guess.
No, that's literally it. Like there's they have a line of wagons they can circle up. right? Like
Yes.
a traveling circus.
Like a traveling circus.
Mommy
And-
Fortuna's Midnight Carnival. I will never understand why it's not Mama. Mommy? Mommy Fortuna?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I know. I don't know why it's Mommy either.
Creatures
it's such
of
a
the
weird
night.
choice.
Brought to light.
That is her tagline, which I also love. I love that Rook, like that's Rook's job.
Yeah, so great.
Rook
anyway.
is just there to say that line. So
just-
Mommy Fortuna comes upon this unicorn by the side of the road, and she sees her for exactly who she is. She knows exactly who she is. She can recognize other magic animals and characters, but she herself is an illusionist. And I think you borrow some of that, like working in illusions, you understand the quote unquote illusion of like the protection
Yeah.
that a unicorn just naturally has, where people mistake them for white mares because they just don't see the horn. So she walks right up to the unicorn and is like, well, let's see if my buddies can tell what this is. And asks Rook, what do you think that is? And he says, dead horse, which I thought was funny.
It's so good.
I was like, she's just asleep, dude. Like, relax. And Schmendrick, who's kind of been kind of quiet and like looming kind of in the back, she asked Schmendrick, he's quiet for a second. And when she makes him answer, there's this really brief shot of the last unicorn asleep with a horn on her forehead.
Yeah.
Before Mommy Fortuna puts one there.
Yeah. The fake one.
So, yeah. So my brain was like, this is the director trying to tell you that Schmendrick could already see what she is.
Oh.
And he stutters with, I'm just trying to lay low because Mommy Fortuna is scary. And he's not as forthwith with her because he also like, I feel like he gets it that like she's a con artist and like this isn't where he wants to be anyway. Fun side note though, there is a bunch of like short stories written about Schmendrick's early life, and I haven't read those yet, but I'm just like, oh no, now I need to go and find them.
I mean, that's got to be kind of fun.
Right? I'm just like, oh no, I can't wait. But so she I know we're kind of jumping around in the timeline, but there's a part of me that kind of wants to talk about the butterfly.
I mean, we have to talk about the butterfly.
Real quick to wrap up,
you know,
we can wrap up the Mommy Fortuna thing. So she puts a fake horn on her because the public won't really be able to see what she is without it.
Yeah.
And locks her up in a cage. You know, Schmendrick kind of like endears himself to her a little bit and like, you know, keeps her company even though he really shouldn't. And, you know, Rook is giving this tour of all these animals and it's just, he's so good at it. He's just, like he knows what he is. He's creepy. He knows what he is. Like I especially like especially like she might bite the fingers of people who poke her, little boy.
Yes, it's so true.
You know?
Because the thing is, every single creature of the night that's inside one of the cages, except for the harpy and the unicorn, is fake. Like, the manticore is just a sick lion, and the dragon is just, I forget what. And there's this giant twisting snake that's just a regular snake. And
the serpent that's supposed to fill the cage is literally just like
a thing that could literally crawl out through the bars.
Like a garden snake. I know.
Well, so Mommy Fortuna is an illusionist, as you said, but the people who are looking at the illusions also have to buy into them.
Yes.
Right? And that's Rook's job. He helps them buy into the illusions, and he does it spectacularly.
He's so good at it. He's just so good at his job. I love him to bits. And the thing about, you know, this traveling circus is like, you know, there's a lot of, I really enjoyed it because there's a lot of really good character stuff. Like Mommy Fortuna and her have this like really deep talk about I know what I did. I know who I am, but like, I also know my strengths and like, remember who made people see you. Like I did that. And like, I came upon you the same way I came upon the harpy. Like, you guys shouldn't have been asleep on the side of the road. Like, you got yourselves into this mess.
Yep.
You know, like,
And I got you, you know?
And I got you. I
And
held you.
no one, I like the idea. I like the idea that she is constantly shoving Schmendrick down and putting him in his place because she's also just an illusionist, right? She can't actually transform the animals. So she's magical, but she's not super magical. So the one thing she's got going for her is that she's the one witch who has captured a harpy, which is why she won't let this harpy go. But I like that kind of her shoving down of Schmendrick and then that becoming a really key point in his character arc, right? The idea that he's constantly trying to prove himself. And I also, and I know we're skipping ahead here, like how Molly totally calls him out on that at the end of the movie. Where she's like, dude, you don't even care about these unicorns. You don't want to save them. Don't pretend you're the hero. You're just trying to prove that you can be magical and that you're a real wizard. You're right, basically.
I mean, I also love that he's like, that's not true. I love other things. And like, you can totally see he wants to say, I love you, though.
Yes,
except he doesn't. But we're jumping ahead. In fact, let's jump back and talk about the butterfly. The butterfly. But actually, let's jump a little further back because I have to say something about King Haggard. Like, the movie sets him up so good. Like, we have these two gentlemen who are walking through this forest. You know, one of them is obviously a seasoned hunter, and the other one's like nobility, but maybe he's an archer. Like, maybe he's okay. I don't know. But like, obviously,
but, like, doesn't even know that unicorns are real.
Exactly.
You know, like baby's first hunt.
Exactly. So that is such a key thing. Like, the lore of King Haggard happens almost immediately before we even really meet the unicorn. I mean, like, technically we get the opening, like, wait, do we even get the opening before that? Shoot.
Yeah, well, we get the magical forest, and then it goes right to the two hunters.
Yeah, before we even meet the unicorn, we hear essentially about King Haggard. Now, we don't know it's about King Haggard, but like the idea that in like a couple of generations of mankind, suddenly there are no unicorns on the world, like in the world. Like, King Haggard has hustle. Like, like it's mind-boggling that you'd be able to like capture all of a race of a thing in what, 10, 20 years, long enough for this dude not even to know them as, like, I thought those were just children's fairy tales, you know, like, not even to even understand that they exist in the world that you're in.
Yeah, no, fair. Because they were so magical and so mysterious in the first place that as soon as they were gone, everyone was like, well, were they ever really there?
Exactly.
And only the old timers can say yes.
And only that man, however old he even is. This is the thing with Rankin and Bass. It's like, he could be 20, he could be 65. We don't know.
He could be 102.
He could be 102.
How old was the magician at the end?
Absolutely no idea.
How old is King Haggard?
Nobody knows. We are this eternal thing. What do you mean there are no more of us? And I like that it's also, you know, it also kind of sets up that like unicorns have very protective kind of magic. Like, they don't really fight so much as they're like, I can teach you how to hide, you know, like, and I can heal you if you're sick, but they're not combative.
Right. So like, mysteriously, every unicorn's forest is always spring.
It's always spring.
And mysteriously, no hunter is ever able to find an animal in their forests.
Yeah.
That little crew of animals looking so sad as she left them. I was like, come back quickly. You're gonna die.
I know.
The hunter's gonna get a cute deer.
Well, because I know, right? It was like, it was also funny because it was like, because of the design choices they made with her face. I think another friend of mine was like, I was always wondering why that nobody ever thought she was like a white deer. Because they weren't familiar with the book so much, and they were just familiar with the cartoon. And I was like, I could see that, actually.
Yeah.
That you might have thought it was a white deer, and it's like, But the animals being like, don't go is some of the most heartbreaking thing. But I also love that she puts in there, and we can be killed if we ever leave our forest.
Yes. Stakes.
stakes. You get stakes pretty immediately. So yes, the butterfly. We don't know if he's drunk. We don't know if he's high. We just know he's on something. Maybe he's high on life. Maybe he's high on poetry.
I kind of think he's high. And the reason I think he's high is because I think classically a lot of these cartoons have a very specific way they code people who are drunk.
True.
Like people who are drunk would have had like the two little red cheeks, right? People who are drunk would have that big red nose, or maybe would be holding a bottle of something, or like sitting slouched in a certain way.
We get four of the things you just mentioned later in the movie with a skeleton, no less.
With the skeleton, exactly. And that's why I think the butterfly is high, because the butterfly is just like zipping around, singing songs, reciting poetry, having a grand old time. I mean, really fantastic.
I mean, you might not be wrong. I do. So I used to think when I was a kid, I thought the butterfly was annoying. And it wasn't until I grew up that I kind of appreciated the butterfly a lot more. And the funny thing about it is, like, I end up singing parts of his song, like, in my day-to-day more often than I think I care to admit.
That's amazing.
Like,
I kind of wish I need to go back and listen to his song again, because I've only seen it the one time and I don't remember it very well. But
it's a mishmash of so many different things. Like, I have many times been like done the jump between I must take the A train to like that little like shanty that he kind of sings, and then to has anybody here seen Kelly? Like, I just do that on, like, I feel like I do that once a week. It just pops into my head for no reason.
I love that. See, my favorite thing about having seen so many of these movies now is when sometimes when you say things or sing things or do things, Joy, I'm like, oh.
I understood that reference.
Exactly. Captain America gif. But, I could kind of see you thinking he was annoying when you were a kid. Because I feel like if I were a kid and I cared about the unicorn in this movie, because the unicorn in this movie is the main character, I'd be like, can this thing just answer her question? Just answer her question, you know?
Yeah. Because he does, like, he plays with her for a bit. He does.
Yeah, he does.
He only answers her question when she turns around, you know? And there's like a race in D&D that can only repeat what it's heard. And that's how I've decided to think about this butterfly.
Oh, I love that.
You know, like,
That's
he can only repeat the things he's heard, and like he doesn't have that is his language. He doesn't really have a language of his own. Like,
yeah.
And
so it's a little bit of that, a little bit of like Bumblebee.
Yes. a little bit of tuning into the station to get the right song.
Exactly. To the song that will give the response that
you want. Exactly. No, that's 100% what it is. It's and I also like when he gets serious and he's no longer kind of like, he's still fluttering around, but not nearly as much as before. And he kind of stops and like relays the information that he thinks is pertinent, but then like just continues on his merry way. Like, eventually, I don't know, he does another line and then he's off. No, I don't know. I
sailing off down the river on his little leaf. But now what he is able to reveal to her is that the unicorns were herded to the end of the earth by the Red Bull. So now she has a direction, at least, which is go to the end of the earth and find the Red Bull.
Yeah, the Red Bull traveled behind them and covered their footsteps. And like, and there's some other like vaguely, you know, almost like a riddle about King Haggard and you know, a couple other things in there. I do feel like it's also not that deep. Like, he does pretty much lay it out of like, you know, and the Red Bull drove them to the end of the earth, and that's where they are.
And that's where they are. And so off she goes.
And
which,
she
you know,
meets,
it's a good thing it was fairly straightforward, because she, like you said, comes across a very interesting cast of characters.
She does.
The first of which...
But before that, though, doesn't it seem like she travels for like a full-on year? Because like there's snow and there's like she goes through the seasons. And I'm like, how did you not run into anybody in a full-on year. Did you just wander from forest to forest? Because maybe you did that.
Forest. Because every time she steps into a forest, it becomes magical and she's protected, question mark?
Question mark? But, like, it seems like she does this for a year, and then she comes across a first person and gets insulted by being called a mare. Which I loved how offended she was.
He also tries to catch her with his belt. I was like,
100% does.
Oh, is that what you do when you come across a strange horse? Take off your belt and try to catch it? All right.
Right. Oh, my God.
So he deserves what he got.
He definitely
Then she comes
does.
across Mommy Fortuna, whom we already discussed, except for her death, which was actually fairly violent. Although
Yes.
it happens kind of off screen. They cut away at just the right moment.
They cut away, and you have this. The Harpy is such a fascinating character, too, because it's, you know, it's this, like, vulture monster with, like,
Yes.
with, like, breasts on a bird.
But too many of them. But I think that is kind of classic Harpy.
I feel like that's also classic Harpy.
It is classic Harpy. Yeah, for them to have more than two breasts.
Oh, also, fun fact, her name is, they gave her the name Seleno, which is a harpy from Greek mythology. So they have a little callback.
There you go. There you go.
But yeah,
So anyway.
she gets killed by the harpy, and it's just like she welcomes her death like, I don't know, man. I find her character fascinating because it's just like, may I live a kind of life where I'm like, I know exactly how I'm going to die and I'm going to embrace it like the way this woman did.
This is it. I don't know that Rook necessarily deserved to be torn to shreds by a harpy. I mean, I guess he was keeping beleaguered animals inside of cages and making a living off of that. That's not great.
I think,
but
I feel bad for Rook. I feel bad for Rook in the way that you like know that somebody is being driven by fear and they're not being given the full story and they're not being told everything, you know, and like
lack of opportunity elsewhere. Like he probably didn't have a lot going for him. And then Mommy Fortuna picked him up and gave him a job that he felt good at for the first time.
Yeah. Like he's just, I mean, not to say he's just there, but he is kind of just there. And, you know, he's just there doing bad stuff. And again, like he even tells her to get rid of the harpy because it scares him. And I feel like that's just his life. You know, like that's just his life. It's like the other infirmed animals are not going to hurt him, you know, but at the same time, it's just like, yes, but you can't keep real stuff. And even he is like, you can't keep an immortal being in a cage. Like you can't do it.
That's a good point. I think that's why I felt extra bad about him being torn up by the harpy.
I know.
The fact that he had been telling her this whole time, we should not be keeping this thing captive. Please, no, not this.
Yeah. And it just, I love the resignedness that the last unicorn has about it of like, she chose her fate years ago. Like, she knew this was how she was going to go. And she did it. That's it. She put her pride before everything else. But like I've never seen such a prideful character get such a weirdly satisfying send-off in that way that like this is exactly how she wanted to go. No, really, like exactly how she wanted to go. And she went.
Yeah. And she went. And she went. Okay. We gotta zip through this because we're not even like a King Haggard.
I know.
Okay. Then they come to the Outlaws.
The not Robin Hood and his merry men.
I kind of love that they have it in their canon that they're like, Robin Hood's not real. I'm the one who's real.
I know. It's so good. And I also love that like
funny.
I love that that Schmendrick can also be like a bard, but not a bard, and just like sing the, you know, like he'll get really excited and like sing the praises of court. I feel like his character is somewhere in between sorcerer and court jester.
Yes.
And that's it. You know, like there's no in between for him. He is just both of these things.
Now, I am kind of confused about Molly Grew because when she first came on, it kind of felt like she was Captain Cully's wife. You know, Robin Hood and Maid Marian are to Captain Cully and Molly Grew. But then she just up and leaves him.
She does.
Goes off on this quest, never comes back, and then goes off with Schmendrick. I was like, wait, I thought you two were the head of this crew. I guess not.
I guess not. I love that she comes across the last unicorn and she's just like, no, this is my life now. And just pieces out. Like she also seems like we get established with her very quickly that like there's no, like you can't really tell her what to do. You just can't. Yeah. Like he tries to get her to like soften up to this new guy he found. And it's just like, no, I'm not going to do it. Cut his throat. You might as well just cut his throat or he'll do you like the way the last one did. And I'm like, whoa, had this worked out, Schmendrick would have been dead.
Dead. Yep. And her very first reaction when she meets the unicorn isn't awe or joy. It's anger. She is so mad that this unicorn took so freaking long to find her.
Yep.
And that she isn't young anymore.
Yeah.
So good.
No, and it's Molly. There's Molly Grew. Molly Grew, the real MVP of this story. She, I feel like we get a lot of realism from her that we don't get from a lot of the other characters. She's usually the person to like, she is a romantic, but she's a romantic in the way that like means for practical assessment. Yeah. Like, you know, it's one of those things where she won't be taken in by the romance because of I assume all the things that have happened to her in her life. There was a meme going around for a while that it was like Molly Grew is every millennial. Damn you, where have you been? It's like every millennial waiting for the last unicorn to show up.
But speaking of all the things she's been through, like what happens to her that she ended up the quote wife to Captain Cully and his crew of outlaws with their 3 times over rat stew. And then just up and goes.
Just up and goes. I mean,
I'd be interested in her short stories.
Also same. I would love more Molly Grew at any and every port.
You know, in addition to being this really headstrong character who's kind of interesting, I think that she also plays a little bit of the oh gosh, like the heart of the team, right? Mm-hmm. Because she's most of what she does in this movie is just have conversations with every single character so that they make reasonable choices.
Yeah. It's like a spiritual walk with Zuko if Zuko was way more talkative and way more no nonsense. Like way more talkative.
And I kind of love, and I know we're zipping ahead here, that so many of these conversations happen in the kitchen because she's the cook, right? So she's in the kitchen and they come in and they're bawling their eyes out or they're sad or they've written poetry or they don't know what to do next. And I just imagine her like shoving a pile of potatoes in their hands and being like, well, if you're going to talk at me, do something useful, you know? And then they sit there, like skinning their potatoes.
And still pouring out their hearts.
And still, exactly.
Yes.
Like, that's how I imagined that going down.
Yes. 1,000 times yes. No, yeah. Molly Grew is the one you come to when you don't understand what's happening and you want to fix it. Actually, real quick, before we completely get off Mommy Fortuna, that was Angela Lansbury.
Yes.
And that was her first voice acting in a theatrically released film.
Ah, cool.
And then after that, it was like Mrs. Potts and Beauty and the Beast and, you know, and everything else. But
all
it was
just, things.
I just love that this was her first one. And she basically just got to play a cackling witch, which I think is great.
Who is mauled by a harpy.
Who's mauled by a harpy.
Delightful.
Should we talk about Prince Lear and King Haggard?
Yeah, we might as well. So fast forwarding very slightly, they get to Haggard's fortress.
Yep.
And Haggard is not really the king that he was made out to be at the beginning of the movie, right? Mm-hmm. He doesn't have this grand castle. It's actually like pieced together and falling apart. The entire thing is covered in cobwebs and dust. And because King Haggard only keeps things that make him happy around, he's driven away most of his court. So it's just him and Prince Lear, and he claims at least 2 more people, but we only see one of those 2 more people.
I know.
You know, he says he has a court of 4, and we see like and his magician,
And his
who,
magician.
leaves immediately, right?
Who did he? Oh, man, I don't even remember the fourth one that he said. Shoot.
It doesn't
matter.
matter. But he's driven away most of his court, and so his castle is in shambles when we come upon him. And really, the only thing he has going for him at this point is his ocean of unicorns.
Yeah.
He just stands at his window every single day staring at this ocean of unicorns that he's captured as the castle and his court deteriorates around him.
Exactly.
Which is interesting, but also, why is Prince Lear still there? What are you doing, buddy?
What a great question. I love that Prince Lear has this devotion to his father. Like, because you can kind of tell that they're not really on the same wavelength. And he, he does sort of know how to talk to his dad, but definitely is careful about it because I'm sure he's also watched him, like, as you said, drive everyone else away. So they have this kind of strained, but also a working relationship. Like, they are the guards of their own castle because they literally don't have anybody else to guard the castle. So it feels less like a father-son relationship and more almost like a coworker relationship, where I definitely get the idea that King Haggard is obviously that boss who wants to do everything himself anyway. And Prince Lear is like, a doting employee who's very loyal, but also like understands that something's broken.
That's fair. And, likely spends 60% of his time away from the castle questing, right?
Yes.
Seems like that's kind of what Prince Lear does. He goes off, he kills a thing, he collects a trophy, and he comes back. He's a hero.
He's a hero.
And then he meets the unicorn, who by this point is a woman, because Schmendrick turned her into a woman in order to protect her from the Red Bull. Mm-hmm. The Red Bull is only attracted to unicorns, and so magic chooses her form. And she's a woman.
I know you meant in a non-physical sense.
Yes.
But my brain didn't interpret it that way. You're just not, this young white-haired woman is just not his type.
Not his type. Not his type. Not attracted.
Not attracted at all.
To her. And now she's a woman and is losing her sense of self. And Prince Lear is falling in love with her. I'm summarizing this part of the movie quickly. Because I want us to be able to actually talk about it.
No, you're doing a great job.
These are all the things that are happening. All the things that are happening are King Haggard wants the last unicorn. Molly Crew just wants everyone to keep it together, people. We can do it. Schmendrick just really wants to help the unicorn find her herd, except that he doesn't actually want that. He just wants to prove that he's a real wizard.
I mean, and also he's trying desperately to protect the last unicorn.
Yes.
Like, genuinely, even though he doesn't really know how to do that. Like,
Prince Lear would like the last unicorn to fall in love with him because now he's in love with her, and she is just slowly losing her sense of self. And that's the act 3 of this movie. So it's a lot going on.
It's a lot going on. I love that this movie has so much of a slow burn at first, but it really hits the rails once you're in the castle. And Schmendrick is able to kind of pull the wool over their eyes a little bit at first, but like Haggard eventually puts it together. And it's not really clear to me whether Schmendrick was actually ever successfully pulling the wool over his eyes, I mean, he may not have been.
It feels like Haggard is kind of just torturing him by making him play this court jester role and making him like walk through the blizzard randomly, which why were they even in the middle of a blizzard? Because King Haggard kind of knows who the unicorn is from the very moment he sees her, or at least he knows she's magical. And then at the end, he says that he's known who she is all along. It was just kind of, but waiting for what is the part of that that's kind of unclear to me. Right? I mean, like, what was he waiting for? I mean, I'm not, just to armchair psychology this for a second. I mean, are we not convinced that Haggard isn't like a psychopath? He has psychopathic tendencies, right? Like, he literally saw one thing in the entire world. The entire world that made him happy. And he collected as much of that thing as he possibly could, which was like 99% of it, and shoved it into his backyard. When I say all the eggs and bacon, I know you're going to think I'm saying a lot of eggs and bacon, servings of eggs and bacon. But what I really mean is all the eggs and bacon. And I know I misquoted that slightly, but that's exactly what's happening here.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, that is King Haggard about unicorns.
He stands in front of his window and stares at them as his castle and everything around him falls into disrepair.
Exactly. Tell me this isn't somebody
Wild.
with psychopathic tendencies, which is why I'm just like,
Something going on.
there's something going on. But which is why I'm also like, this is why he toys with Schmendrick. Like, this is why he draws it out, because he also hasn't had to hunt a unicorn in what must be 15, 20 years. Like, he might also be biding his time until it's like, no, you have to reveal yourself to me. And like, that's why he thinks he's playing this game with the Lady Amalthea. Like, you know, everything about you, it was all my spies to tell me who you really are. And like, he wants her to admit it.
That she's the unicorn.
She's the unicorn. But the problem is, no unicorn that he's ever tracked down before has been trapped in a human body. And he doesn't, like, it wouldn't even occur to him that she was losing her sense of health, because he doesn't sense of self.
So the longer he draws it out, the less likely she is to tell him who she is, because she's forgetting who she is.
Exactly. And it's like, it's the self-fulfilling prophecy of like, no, dude, you just couldn't make the serotonin on your own, so you had to find other ways to get it. Like, you're depressed and you don't know why, but you also won't get help. Cool.
See, all he really needed was a Molly Grew in his head.
I know.
Like Molly Grew to say, you're being cruel to Prince Lear. Just talk to him. And then going to Prince Lear and being like, listen, dude, she doesn't like parts of dead animals. Maybe stop bringing her parts of dead animals. You know, I don't really think it's working. And then he comes up with poetry, which actually does work, by the way. And they kiss. Thanks, Molly.
Thanks, Molly. I mean, like, I love his dumb poetry. I love it so much. It's so bad. It's so bad, but so beautiful.
Should we talk about, like, the final act of this movie?
Yes. Well, okay, I think the reason the poetry actually works is because he's not playing to his strengths, because he can't. Like, that's not the way to win this woman. So he is in vulnerable, untrodden territory. And she herself, again, as we've said, is slowly losing her sense of self and is also in vulnerable and in completely untrodden territory. And like, I think that's why it works. Like, I'm not mad that they fall in love. I've never been upset. Like, I've never been upset at that dynamic, because it makes sense. And I think, I think it works. But yeah, do you want to talk about the skeleton?
I think it works. I think it works too. And I think the only thing that I kind of had to stop and think about is like, am I actually happy that she went back to being a unicorn?
Right.
Because, you know, she was so insistent that she really didn't want to.
Right.
And there's some part of me that, you know, and Molly actually was on her side. Molly was like, well, if she doesn't want to be a unicorn, then we're not going to force her to become a unicorn. And everyone else is like, we must finish the quest, you know?
I know. Well, it's definitely, it's a lot of unfair pressure, right, to put on her, because it's like, she doesn't remember who she was. She doesn't remember that she had this quest, that she had this very important quest to free literally everyone else who is like her. And it is an important quest. And she recruited these people to her important quest. Yes, and then promptly forgot all about it. So I kind of understand both of them. Like, I definitely get that it's like, sure, and this is also why I love Molly, because it's like, well, circumstances change. They just do. Right. And like, if the Red Bull hadn't recognized her, maybe the ending would have been different. But like, at that point, Schmendrick is even like, well, there's no reason to keep her disguised. And it's even harder for her to run away from him as a human being.
Yeah.
Like, it's not going to help her to not have the speed of a horse. Like, she like breaks her ankle, which is like the most human being thing, I think, on the planet. Like, it's such a damsel in distress move. And it's just like, oh, there she goes. Oh, she tripped over something. Uh-oh.
Oh no. And then Lear puts himself between the bull and her. And I'm like, dude, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And the answer is literally nothing. Because when he puts himself between her and the bull, it's actually Schmendrick who saves her by making her into a unicorn again. So that, to your point, she's able to, at horse speed, gallop out of the tunnel and out to the beach. And then the second time Lear puts himself between her and the Red Bull, he straight dies.
Where's your sword, my
dies.
dude? Where is your sword? Your body is going to do nothing. You're not even wearing armor.
He literally thrusts his arms to the side, chest out, come at me, bro.
I know.
And then dies. You're like, dude.
And promptly tries to get up and cannot, and then dies on the beach. Now, again, which, by the way, what a weird way to go. Weird flex, but okay. But like, there's this whole moment of, this is why she had to be turned into a human. Like, you know, this is the, you can't pull at the tapestry of my life, right? Like, she had to be turned into a human because she had to care about Prince Lear. She had to care that he was hurt. And that gives her the strength to be like, you hurt my boyfriend, and push the bull into the ocean. It's not that simple, but I'm simplifying it for reasons.
It basically is, though. It kind of is.
Has she even met any of the other unicorns? I don't know. We never know.
Actually, no. and she still doesn't meet them at the end of the movie.
Nope, they all run away.
Because she herds the Red Bull backwards into the ocean. I actually really like the animation when they have the unicorns kind of surging out on the tops of the waves. That was pretty fun. Super well done. So this tidal wave of unicorns comes surging out of the ocean, and they just rush right past her, not even a thank you, down the road, destroy the castle, and off back to their own forests.
Yep.
Leaving our heroes in their dust, almost literally, with a dead Lear by their side.
Yeah. That's it. Because it's the weirdest. It's like, why would you care that you're suddenly free, you know, and being captured for so long? Like, on the one hand, I kind of like that they just run off because it's like, well, their forests need them. And on the other hand, it's like, yeah, but that makes sense, though. They're just, you know, like, why would they care about these random humans on a beach?
Yeah, and you're right.
Like, they don't have regrets. Right? They don't,
Were they the narwhals?
No. The narwhals were just narwhals, as far as I know.
I kind of wanted them to be narwhals.
I mean, we all know narwhals are the unicorns of the sea. And we get unicorns. We get narwhals
in the ocean earlier. So I was like, did he transform them into narwhals?
I know. I think it's one of those, that would be great. It's not specific. I wonder if it gets specific in the book. It might. I actually felt like it was, because he talks about because King Haggard talks about the tide bringing them close to shore. I thought it was one of those weird metaphors for like foam on the waves. That
would make sense.
Like that they're just underneath the surface and they come within inches of it, but they never come out because they're scared of the Red Bull. And that tracks
with the end of the movie too, when they're surging along the tops of the crests of the waves. No, that makes sense.
I also love that they're kind of tiny and then they grow bigger.
Bigger and bigger. They don't feel any regret because the only unicorn who feels regret is the last unicorn.
Also true.
Womp womp.
Womp womp.
Regret
and she's different
lost
now.
Her true love.
But then she brings him back.
And can't be with him. He just goes questing off forever. Is that what he does? He just goes to be a hero.
He just goes to be a hero somewhere else. There is apparently there's a short story where he has taken over King Haggard's kingdom. So he's the king. And there's, I don't know the specifics of that, but it's only been a short story. It hasn't been adapted yet. But yeah, everybody keeps talking to Peter Espiegal of like, hey, what if you made a sequel? And he's like, I'm not interested in doing that. It feels like a pretty concise story and I'm okay with that.
It had a real beginning, middle, and end.
It definitely did.
You know?
I love that Molly Grew just like, yeah, I'll stay with Schmendrick. Why wouldn't I? Goes from like slit his wizard to, of course I'll go with you. Like,
I kind of love them. I think they're great.
I do too. I love them so much.
I'm not upset by them. Like, I feel like as he grows into his magic and he becomes a quote real wizard, she'll just be able to knock sense into him now and then and knock him down a peg when he needs it.
Yeah.
It's gonna be, I think they're a good couple.
Yeah. No, 100%. I love the way this movie ends. I really enjoy the movie overall, to be fair. I'm so sorry, listeners, if this is your first experience of The Last Unicorn. Hopefully you watched it before listening to this episode, because I know we jumped around a bit. But
I don't think we were any more chaotic than this actual movie is. Like, if you listened to this podcast episode about this movie and didn't love how chaotic it was, I don't know if this movie is for you.
That's fair. That's fair.
Hot take.
Hottest
I don't know if that's
take.
fair.
It's
a little chaotic. It kind of jumps around.
It is a little chaotic. I mean, Rankin and Bass in general is usually a chaotic cartoon. Like that is their literal drawing style. They draw with chaos in mind.
Happen. Or things just, you pan off to the side and then you pan back and the scenery's changed and you don't know why, or someone's dead on the ground.
Or someone makes like a facial expression and sort of stops the flow of the scene to make that facial expression. And you're like, why did that happen? Okay, well, we're a little over time, but did you have a one more thing?
You know what my one more thing is.
Oh, I do. So let me go first then, because mine's sort of weird in an existential kind of way. Mine is one more piece of trivia, which which I thought was kind of funny. Dustin Hoffman, Harrison Ford, and Mark Hamill were all considered for the role of Schmendrick.
What? Wait, say them one more time.
Dustin Hoffman, Harrison Ford, and Mark Hamill. Now, the funny thing is Mark Hamill is a voice actor. So, like, that one almost makes sense. But the funny thing is, like, you cast him in the role where he's kind of the bumbling idiot. And I'm like, that's straight out of Star Wars, though. Like, you're trying to just basically make him Luke Skywalker. So I'm like, oh, okay, weird, but okay.
Or you cast him as the villain and it's Joker, right? Like, Mark Hamill can go either way.
Exactly. But I feel like this particular role was definitely screaming Luke Skywalker. I feel like that's where they were going with it, which, by the way, is so weird.
Time.
Yes, which is so weird to have Dustin Hoffman and Harrison Ford also on that list. like what?
Dustin Hoffman, I'm like, nah, Harrison Ford, what are you doing there?
Where are you? What? What?
I don't think I know what his voice sounds like, which is not great.
Just sultry.
Which doesn't really work for Schmendrick.
Absolutely not. Like, look, would I 100% believe? Also, by the way, there was this, like, in a totally quick sidebar, I promise. There was a Daily Show interview with Harrison Ford once where I think it was back in the Jon Stewart days, where he was like, what would you really like to do that you haven't gotten to do on film yet? Like, would you do one of those really stupid movies, like a Dumb and Dumber thing? And he was like, oh my God, that would be great. I would love to do that. And I was like, who isn't casting Harrison Ford in this thing he wants to do? Because he's so, like, tall and lanky. I would just love to see him act like a dumb for like 2 hours. I would
do it.
Take all my money.
Like, best, like, what? Couple million you would throw away ever?
Right?
I mean, what would the budget on that possibly be?
Exactly.
I bet he would pay you to make that movie.
Right? Just saying. Anyway, so that's my one more thing.
Produced by, directed by, starring
Harrison Ford.
Harrison Ford. My one more thing is highly predictable, which is that there is a three-legged, one-eyed cat in this movie.
Pirate cat.
The first time the three-legged, one-eyed cat shows up, you just think it's super cute. And it just hangs out with Molly in the kitchen and is just, like, kind of inconveniently on stools or on tables when she's trying to peel potatoes, which is exactly what you would expect of a cat. And then it is, speaking of the chaoticness that is this movie, it just starts talking at one point.
Yep.
It just, I guess, where it was narratively necessary.
When he's alone with Molly.
Exactly. When it was narratively necessary for someone else to provide exposition. The writers of this movie were like, well, the cat. obviously.
Obviously.
And then he talks, and he's a pirate, and it's beautiful. Actually, I do kind of enjoy the headcanon. I was thinking about this afterwards, that Molly has really been talking to him all along. He just never talks when someone else is in the kitchen.
Yeah, right.
You know, and Molly is so often beleaguered by everyone else in her life. We just didn't really see her alone with a cat prior to that moment in the movie. But my
She finally had
cat
5
moment,
minutes to herself.
Exactly. And then the cat started talking, and it's like, oh, come on. Do I ever get any time? My favorite part of the movie is Blessed voice actor. Who is the voice actor?
Oh, of the cat?
Of the cat.
Oh, I had
When
that.
the cat is being pet, the voice actor doesn't actively purr. Instead, what the voice actor chooses to do is literally say the words, purr, purr.
Yes.
So the voice actor says, oh, purr, purr, do that. Yes, that'd be nice when being pet. And I was like, what? But also, is that what my cats think when I pet them? Probably.
Probably. Okay, so the voice actor for the cat
Purr.
was Don Messick, who I think...
Purr.
Purr. Who I think is a voice actor, generally speaking. I'm not recognizing him. But another funny side note, I don't think I mentioned him when we were like star-studded cast, but Renee Auberjonois is also in this, playing the skeleton who gets drunk. How do we not talk about the skeleton?
The skeleton who gets drunk on not wine, but on the idea of wine.
Yes.
It's not even real wine. It's an empty bottle.
And how do we know he's drunk? His bones turn pink.
His bones turn pink.
I know
His head starts lolling slightly to the left.
I know we can't name this episode, but I would totally name it His Bones Turn Pink. I would do that in a hot second. But I also love that the skeleton is like, it's been so long since I've talked to anybody. Just keep talking to me. I'll be here all night. Like, he spends half his lines laughing. I don't know, man. I feel like Renee was having a lot of fun, and it showed.
Totally agreed. See? Movie MVPs. Talking skeleton, high butterfly, three-legged one-eyed cat.
And Molly Crew.
And Molly Crew.
And a partridge
Human
in the pear tree.
MVP. Oh boy, we are over time.
We are over time.
So, this was a lot of fun, Joy. I'm excited for the next movie night.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm glad we were able to pick one that was like, well, this is completely out of left field.
Mm-hmm. Let's dive headfirst into this chaotic, beautiful mess. Okay, well, listeners, between now and our next movie night, we would love to hear from you. Please check us out at Binge O'Clock Pod on Twitter and Facebook, where you can answer the question, if you were a knight, what great deed do you think would impress your love? You can also email us at bingeoclockpod@gmail.com. And don't forget, we have a Patreon. Find us at patreon.com/blockpod.
That's right. And tell your friends, tell your family, tell your loved ones, tell the live lobsters in your life about Binge O'Clock, and we will see you next time.
Okay, here's what I would do. I don't think I would bring my love bits of dead animal. Like, that never seems like a good idea. But I feel like I would do the sort of thing where I would travel to the end of the earth to find them something exotic that they had never tried before. Like in those stories about people who had never had an orange and they had just ever read about an orange, and then you bring them an orange. Or, you know, very like Kaylee Strawberry moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I feel like it's got to be something like that.
Like a food. Well, for you especially, I feel like food oriented.
Did I just name two foods? Yes. But two very rare exotic items. Like nothing like a chalice that will make you live forever. Like just a gift.
Yeah. No, I can totally see that. I feel like mine would probably be this, like the same-ish thing, but it would be an experience of some kind. Like either I'm able to figure out how to cook their favorite meal, or genuinely be like, oh, have you always wanted to skydive? Insert something there and be like,
yeah, something
okay,
medieval. What's the medieval version of have you ever been skydiving?
jumping into a questionable lake. Maybe. I don't know.
I was gonna say, would you tell
Would you
them that you
swing
can
on
show
this
them the
tire
world?
swing with me? But it's not really a tire. It's like,
Shining, shimmering, splendid.
we're done. Like, I know we just call her the last unicorn, and like her name is essentially Unicorn. And when she turns human, spoilers, like her name becomes Amalthea. But like, I hate just being like, so the last unicorn every single time I have to talk to her. It's like, don't you guys have names? You're older than the sky, isn't there? How do you?
They don't need names.
I don't need names.
There's like one unicorn per forest. They don't. Why would
know.
they even need names? They don't talk to each other.
They don't talk to each other. I guarantee you, if they had been talking, maybe you guys would have heard about this King Haggard and the Red Bull a lot sooner.
Yep. Or, everyone you ever knew disappearing all at once.
But that's the thing. They don't even know each other. They don't have brunch. They should have brunch.
Brunch is how you get to know people.
Brunch is how you get to know people. So